A 15-year-old boy stood over his father's deathbed, watching him die from a disease that was completely curable. The only problem? They were too poor to afford the medicine. Fast forward 30 years, and that same boy had become so unbelievably wealthy that he could have bought the entire pharmaceutical company that made that medicine. But it gets crazier. He didn't stop there. He went on to control half of Hong Kong's economy, owned ports in 52 countries, and became so powerful that when he pulled his money out of China, the Communist Party itself publicly attacked him and called him a traitor. This is the insane story of Li Ka-shing, the man who went from selling fake flowers on the streets to becoming Asia's richest person, worth over $35 billion. Li Ka-shing's journey reads like something out of a novel. From a refugee fleeing war-torn China with nothing, to building a business empire worth over $35 billion. He owns ports, telecoms, retail chains, and real estate across 52 countries. But here's what makes his story truly fascinating. While other billionaires inherited wealth or got lucky with tech, Li built his fortune the old-fashioned way, one ruthless business decision at a time. And the methods he used? They're lessons that still apply today. In 1940, 12-year-old Li Ka-shing was living a comfortable middle-class life in Chaozhou, China. His father was a schoolteacher, respected in the community. Life was predictable, safe, ordinary. Then the Japanese invaded. The family fled south to Hong Kong with almost nothing. They arrived as refugees in a city already bursting with displaced people. And this is where Li's father, unable to find work as a teacher in a city flooded with educated refugees, took whatever jobs he could find. The stress, the poverty, the desperation, it broke him. He contracted tuberculosis. Now, here's the devastating part. They couldn't afford medicine. Li watched his father deteriorate day by day, knowing that somewhere in the world there was a cure, a treatment, something that could save him. But not for people like them, not for the poor. His father died when Li was just 15 years old. At the funeral, Li made himself a promise. He would never be powerless again. Never be at the mercy of circumstances. Never watch someone he loved suffer because of money. This wasn't just ambition. This was survival instinct, weaponized into pure determination. With his father gone, Li became the family's breadwinner. He dropped out of school and found work at a plastics factory, working 16-hour days. And here's where most people would just clock in, clock out, collect a paycheck. Not Li. He watched everything. How the machines worked, how the business operated, how the owner made decisions. He turned that factory floor into his own private business school. Within 2 years, he wasn't just a worker. He was running the entire factory at 17 years old. But working for someone else, even as a manager, wasn't enough. He had bigger plans. By 1950, at just 22, Li had saved enough to start his own factory, Chung Kong Industries. The name means Yangtze River, always flowing forward, never stopping. Symbolic, but here's what actually mattered. Li had spotted an opportunity. Plastic flowers. Now, this might sound ridiculous. Who builds an empire on fake flowers? But Li understood something crucial. Hong Kong was perfect for manufacturing. Low labor costs, strategic location, and most importantly, plastic flowers were about to explode in Western markets. Real flowers died. Plastic ones lasted forever. It was obvious. At least it was obvious to Li. He started small, but he had a secret weapon: obsessive attention to quality and innovation. While competitors pumped out cheap, obviously fake flowers, Li's team studied real flowers. The way petals curved, how colors transitioned, the subtle imperfections that made them look authentic. His plastic flowers were so realistic that Western buyers couldn't believe they were fake. By the late 1950s, Chung Kong Industries was Hong Kong's largest plastic flower exporter. Li was wealthy, successful, comfortable. And that's exactly when he made the move that would define his legacy. He got out. See, Li understood something that most successful business owners don't. Today's gold mine is tomorrow's graveyard. Plastic flowers were peaking. Competition was intensifying. Margins were shrinking. So in 1958, while everyone else was trying to get into plastic flowers, Li was looking for the next opportunity. Real estate Hong Kong in the 1960s was chaotic. This is where his genius really shows. Li had noticed something. Hong Kong was running out of land. It's an island. You can't create more space. And all these people pouring in, they needed somewhere to live. The government would have to build up, not out. High-rise apartments were the future. Li bought up properties in strategic locations and started developing high-rise residential buildings. But here's the innovation that changed Hong Kong's real estate market forever. He pioneered selling apartments before they were built. Pre-sales. This meant he could fund construction with buyers' money instead of bank loans. Less risk, higher returns. Pure genius. By 1979, Li was one of Hong Kong's richest men. But he was still seen as a manufacturer, a property developer. Not a true tycoon, not part of the old money British establishment that really controlled Hong Kong. That was about to change. Hutchison Whampoa was one of Hong Kong's legendary British trading houses, or Hongs. It owned ports, shipping, retail, telecommunications, everything. But it was struggling financially. The British owners needed a buyer, and in 1979, Li Ka-shing made his move. The acquisition was historic. For the first time, a Chinese businessman had taken control of one of the British Hongs. It wasn't just a business deal, it was a symbol. The old colonial order was ending. A new era was beginning, and Li was leading it. But the genius wasn't just buying Hutchison, it was what Li did next. He restructured, streamlined, cut the fat. Then he diversified. He used Hutchison's ports business as a foundation and expanded into telecommunications, retail, infrastructure, and energy. He turned a struggling colonial relic into a modern multinational conglomerate. So how did Li Ka-shing become not just successful, but one of Asia's richest men? 3 principles. First, cash is king. Li never over-leveraged. He watched other tycoons borrow huge amounts, expand aggressively, then collapse when markets turned. Not Li. He kept massive cash reserves. This meant when crises hit, and they always do, he could buy assets at fire sale prices while everyone else was scrambling to survive. Second, diversification. Li never put all his eggs in one basket. Plastics, real estate, ports, telecommunications, retail energy, infrastructure across 52 countries. If one sector crashed, others kept him afloat. And more importantly, his businesses often complemented each other, creating competitive advantages. Third, know when to exit. This is the one most people miss. Li didn't just know when to enter markets, he knew when to leave. Plastic flowers at their peak. He started selling Hong Kong properties in the late 1990s and early 2000s, just before the market stagnated. In 2015, he moved assets out of China right before the government started cracking down on billionaires. Timing. But who is Li Ka-shing beyond the balance sheets? Here's what's fascinating. He's notoriously frugal. He wears a cheap Citizen watch that costs $20. He's been using the same wallet for decades. He flies commercial, lives in the same house he bought in the 1960s. Why? Because Li never forgot what it felt like to be poor. to watch his father die, to work 16-hour days in a factory. Money, for Li, isn't about luxury. It's about security, power, and never being vulnerable again. He's also a massive philanthropist. Through the Li Ka-shing Foundation, he's donated over $2.5 billion to education and healthcare. Remember how he couldn't afford medicine for his father? Now he's funding medical research and hospitals across Asia. It's not just charity, it's personal. In 2015, Li did something that sent shockwaves through Asia. He started pulling assets out of China. He sold buildings, businesses, investments, and he moved everything to Europe. Ports in the UK, telecommunications in Austria, infrastructure across the continent. Chinese state media attacked him, called him a traitor, accused him of abandoning China. But Li had seen something others hadn't. Xi Jinping's government was changing. The era of billionaire-friendly policies was ending. Regulations were tightening. Government control was increasing. And Li, who had survived the Japanese invasion, the Communist Revolution, the Cultural Revolution, Hong Kong's handover, he knew when to move. Sure enough, within a few years, China started cracking down on billionaires. Jack Ma disappeared for months. Evergrande collapsed. Fortunes evaporated. But Li, he was already out. Safe. Again, that timing. In 2018, at 90 years old, Li Ka-shing officially retired. He handed control of his empire to his son, Victor. But here's the thing about Li. He's never really stopped. He still shows up to the office, still watches the markets, still makes calls. Because for Li, business isn't a job. It's survival instinct. It's the promise he made at his father's funeral. Li Ka-shing's story isn't just about becoming rich. It's about understanding timing, managing risk, and never forgetting where you came from. From a teenage refugee who couldn't afford medicine for his dying father, to a business emperor who controls infrastructure across 5 continents. That's not luck, that's strategy, that's discipline. That's never allowing yourself to be powerless again. The lesson? Opportunity exists in every crisis. The question is, are you prepared to see it? Are you willing to work 16-hour days? Are you obsessed enough to study every detail? And most importantly, do you know when to get out? So what do you think? Could Li Ka-shing's 3 principles, keeping cash reserves, diversifying relentlessly, and knowing when to exit, work in today's world? Or was his success just a product of a specific time and place that can never be replicated? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if Li's story of turning tragedy into unstoppable ambition inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are so many more untold stories of people who refuse to stay powerless.